I am absolutely delighted to introduce you to Stephen Flaherty, Head of Enterprise Architecture and Core Engineering in Public Cloud at JPMorgan Chase, who's going to tell us a lot more about that in practice.
Hi there. So thanks, Cornelia, and thanks to Pivotal for putting on such a fantastic conference. As Cornelia said, my name's Stephen Flaherty. I'm the Head of Engineering, Architecture, and Public Cloud at JP Morgan. I've been with the firm now close to 18 years, and I was trying to think last night, the last time I talked in public about some of our global technology transformation. I think it was a couple of years ago at a fintech conference in Scotland, hence the accent, where I talked about a lot of the frameworks and a lot of the platforms that we're starting to implement, and I talked about some of our wins and some of our losses as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend a little bit of time just taking you through a little bit of a pit stop in JP Morgan Chase's journey, and specifically how we're leveraging Spring in a very big way. But in order to start, I thought I'd set a little bit of context. And I'm sure some of the measurements that we've got on the screen probably catch your eye. If you're interested in resiliency, us processing $6 trillion worth of payments a day. If you're interested in data, 390 petabytes of data, and obviously the responsibility we have considering the client data that we hold. But for the purpose of this talk, I want you to focus on the 53,000 people in technology and close to over 35,000 engineers as part of that group, and also the 6,500 systems and applications that we manage. Because when I think about engineering experience, our architecture practices, and our drive towards more public cloud usage, at the apex of all of that are those engineers. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of a journey on how we're hoping to empower those engineers even further with self-service. So in order to compartmentalize this a little bit, I'm going to talk about these in 4 chunks. We're going to talk about platforms that JP Morgan Chase are progressing on. We're going to talk about the frameworks in which we run on top of it. We're going to talk about our CI/CD toolchain and a real overlay to the work that Cornelia was just talking about. And we're going to talk a little bit about process. But I hope to not talk about the normal agile, DevOps, SRE, etc. JP Morgan's progressing on all of those fronts, but I want to talk about things that are a little bit different. So let's talk about platforms. So JPMC have implemented what I refer to as a 3+1 strategy. We've targeted the 3 big cloud providers, and we've also got very long early in our private cloud implementation with Cloud Foundry. To give you an idea of the scale, about a year ago, we were deploying 6,000 times a month to that environment. Now we're close to 6,000 to 7,000 times a day. So by anybody's kind of yardstick, that's a huge success. But we're a wee bit longer. It's taken a little bit longer on the public cloud side. But we're doing some things this year that's accelerating us even further into the public cloud realm. And with that comes the inevitable discussion around portability. And we're positioned ourselves pretty well because from a portability perspective, we doubled down heavily on Spring a few years ago. Still the most prevalent language we have in JPMC. And we created a framework with a team that works for me underneath Bill Livers, created a framework called Mineta. And if you want to kind of visualize what Mineta is, think about start.spring.io, but how we take those Spring Boot type components and how we run them within the JP Morgan ecosystem. So we're very disciplined, almost religious with regard to not deviating from the core path. But we layer on top what we consider to be those differentiators, so authentication, authorization, any proprietary data protection frameworks. And we make it really easy for our engineers to embrace. So right now, in each day, there's 250 components created a day using this framework. And again, our hope is that everything else that we're doing in JPMC can follow a similar level of experience for our engineers. We also can't really think about scale without talking about our CI/CD engine. We lovingly refer to this in JPMC as JET, which is our JPMC Enterprise Toolchain, which is an amalgamation of 14 different products, most of them open sourced, but a few products we've built ourselves, just because in the financial services world, there was some differentiators that we needed to have. But as we start progressing on our public cloud strategy, as we start progressing even further and going deeper into our frameworks, and we talk about portability, there was one key piece that was missing. And that was just what we talked about. It was Spinnaker. So last year, we've been working heavily with Pivotal, with a lot of the cloud providers, to try and bring Spinnaker to the enterprise. And we can say now that of those 6,000 deployments a day, the majority of them are running through our Spinnaker implementation. Our Jet engine itself processes close to 65,000. I think our peak was 65,000 builds a day. On average, about 55,000 builds. And the importance of Jet isn't just about us configuring these open source tools in our own homegrown. It's about creating a cohesive pattern that our engineers can follow that will expedite and fast track them from a concept to cache for our clients. And we refer to that as instant change authorization. If you follow all the right patterns, if you reach the right quality thresholds, if you meet our cyber bars, then we allow you to do full continuous delivery with Spinnaker. And we've got about 200 apps just now that are going through that cycle, and we hope over the next year to grow that even further. I'm going to touch a little bit about some of the service, some of the techniques that we've been using. Again, I said I wasn't going to talk about Agile and SRE, etc., but let me talk a little bit about what we refer to as cloud parties and Slipstream. In order to accelerate, our operating committee led by Jamie Dimon often talks about leveraging the enterprise that is JPMC, but really behaving like you're a small company. So don't let bureaucracy get in the way of doing the right thing. Make sure we absolutely protect the client, but start to think a little bit smaller. And when we reviewed what we've been doing in the public cloud for the last few years, one thing became apparent. We were behaving like a very big enterprise. So we implemented something that we refer to as cloud parties, where we take our cyber colleagues, identity access management, and the AD teams, and we sit them all in a room with us, and we have like a week-long hackathon. I say a room with us. We run these across multiple locations with hundreds of engineers. And that's fast-tracked us. It's fast-tracked us not even thinking about our workloads moving to and leveraging more public cloud services, but it's also fast-tracked us with a lot of education that we had to do within the firm. Now, the reason why I like the cloud parties is not for that week specifically, although it's quite good. We've got balloons and ice cream and cowbells ringing and everything else. The reason why I like it is the pre- and post-party events. The pre-events are about architecture. It's about decomposing some of the monoliths we have. The post-events are effectively taking the lessons learned out of that party, hardening them up so that the next party we have, the same engineer doesn't have to have that same experience. And that level of iteration and agile and retrospection on a very grand scale has allowed us now to believe that we're starting to get into more of the market-leading position that we should be in. So I talked about some of these measurements, but again, just to talk about the kind of scale. So we talked about 6,000 a month going to 6,000 a day with regard to deployments. The only way we can do that is through Mineta. People actually thinking about how to decompose to the right level and move at pace. We can't do that without a continuous integration, continuous delivery tool chain that allows us to progress much faster than we have historically. We use cloud parties to get a 10x type increase in our workloads by collapsing this large organization down into an organization that can move at the right pace, but then taking those lessons learned and expanding into the enterprise. And the last piece on here is around these Ignite communities of practice. That's our internal terminology for a global communities of practice program where we're trying to get a lot of our engineers, not just in the same location to gather around certain topics, but how we then want to move to what I refer to as phase 2, where we have pockets of engineers that are focused on Kubernetes, and they might be in Glasgow, which is where obviously my accent's from, or you could have them in London and Mumbai and Hyderabad and Columbus and all the other sites where we have technology, but start to share best practice across the entire enterprise. So I want to leave you with one key piece. Our platforms are very important. When we layer on top of it Spring, and we have tools like Mineta and frameworks that allow our engineers to, I usually talk about Mineta and these kind of ecosystems as having our cake and eat it, because I can get a level, using my enterprise architecture hat, of consistency and logging and authentication across the entire enterprise. But often when you do things like that, it's almost sometimes at the detriment of the engineers. Mineta and Spring Boot, etc., don't provide that. We provide our cake and eat it because the engineers want to embrace it. And that's the reason why it's organically grown within JP Morgan. But then you layer on top the glue, and that glue being our Spinnaker implementation through our Jet construct, which allows us now to take all of that goodness and look to a truly ubiquitous multi-cloud deployment paradigm. We've not even scratched the surface thinking about not just going Highland or Canary or red-black deployments, but now starting to think of all the telemetry that we can provide with Spinnaker and how it will be the next step in the evolution of JP Morgan Chase. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.